It is just wild to think that the direct ancestor of something like Starship isn't a cannon, but a wooden toy.
Yeah, a toy bird from ancient Greece.
We're looking at a timeline that starts with, like, a steam-powered pigeon in 400 BC and ends with literal skyscrapers trying to land on Mars.
It's an incredible arc. So welcome to a deep dive into the history of rocketry. Our mission today is to figure out how we actually broke the chains of gravity.
And it wasn't a straight line at all.
No, not at all. It was a lot of trial, error, and a lot of explosion.
Explosions is definitely the key word. I think most people just see a launch and think, fire goes down, rocket goes up. Simple.
Yeah, right.
But the engineering to keep that from just becoming a massive bomb is what we're really unpacking.
Exactly. And to get there, you have to start way back with the basic physics. It all kicks off with Archites of Tarentum, 400 BC.
With the wooden pigeon.
With the wooden pigeon. It flew on steam pressure. And it's really the first recorded proof of the action-reaction principle.
Which is just Newton's third law. Right? Hundreds of years before Newton. Push something out the back, you move forward.
That's it. But, steam doesn't have nearly enough kick to get you to space. For that, you need chemistry.
Okay, so that takes us to China.
To China, 1232 AD, the Battle of Kaikeng, they used these fire arrows.
Bamboo tubes packed with gunpowder.
The first real solid fuel rockets.
Now, here's where the research really surprised me. I always had this idea that the tech just sort of drifted to Europe and got better. But the big leap happened in India.
It did. This is a crucial, often overlooked part of the story. In the late 1700s, the Kingdom of Mysore.
Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan.
Yes. They figured out that bamboo was the limiting factor. It just bursts if you pack too much gunpowder in it. So they made a switch.
To iron casings.
To iron. It's basically a stronger pressure vessel.
So more pressure means more thrust, which means way, way more range.
And they used them with devastating effect against the British, who were so, let's say, impressed.
Battered, you mean?
Right. They were so battered, they reverse-engineered them into what they called Congreve rockets.
And I have to pause here, because this is the dot I connected. These are the rockets. When we sing about the rocket's red glare in the U.S. national anthem.
You're singing about Mysore technology used by the British, shelling an American fort. It's a direct lineage.
Okay, so we have the power, but not the control, not the math.
Exactly. And for that, we turn to the fathers of modern rocketry. You've got Tsiolkovsky in Russia. He's the one who did the math.
The rocket equation.
The rocket equation.
Yeah.
He proved solid fuel, like gunpowder, would never get us to the moon. You can't turn it off, and it's too heavy. He showed you need liquid fuel and stages.
Because liquid lets you throttle it.
It lets you throttle, and it just packs more punch for its weight. And then Robert Goddard in the U.S., he's the one who actually built it.
In a cabbage patch in Massachusetts, of all places.
1926, he launched the first liquid-fueled rocket, just gasoline and liquid oxygen. It only went about 40 feet up, but it worked.
But we can't ignore the dark pivot in this story. The technology didn't really scale up until it became a weapon.
The V-2, Werner von Braun, WWII, a terrible weapon, but from a purely mechanical standpoint, it was the first man-made object to cross the Kármán line.
The 100-kilometer boundary of space.
So modern space travel was, unfortunately, born from missile tech.
And that DNA carried all the way through the space race. Sputnik, Gagarin, Apollo. It was all about building bigger rockets to throw things further and then just throwing the rocket away.
The whole paradigm was expendable. You fly it once, it crashes in the ocean. It's like throwing away a Boeing 747 after a single flight.
It would make air travel impossible.
Yeah.
Which, of course, brings us to the modern era. To SpaceX and the Falcon 9.
The vertical landing, that's the moment the economics of space fundamentally changed.
Ah.
But there's a technical shift happening right now that's even more interesting. The fuel itself is changing again.
We're talking about methalox.
Methalox, yes. Methane and liquid oxygen. The new mega rocket Starship, the engines from Blue Origin, they're all switching to methane.
And it burns cleaner, which is good for reuse.
It does. But there's a deeper, more strategic reason hidden in the chemistry.
This is the in situ idea, right?
Exactly. You can make methane on Mars. All you need is subsurface water ice and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Okay, hold on. That is a massive shift in intent. The kerosene we use for the moon, you have to bring all of it with you for the round trip.
Right. With kerosene, your return ticket has to be in your gas tank when you leave Earth. With methane, you can refuel at the destination.
So we've gone from a wooden bird to iron warheads to machines that are designed from the ground up to treat Mars like a gas station.
It's the ultimate evolution of that first steam pigeon. We've mastered action-reaction so well that we're not just building vehicles to visit space anymore. We're building the supply chain to live there.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought for you to chew on. If the basic architecture of our newest rockets is now being dictated by the chemistry of another planet, does that mean the space age is over and the colonial age has, technically, already begun? Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
You know, when we think about the story of rocketry, our minds usually jump to NASA or
The V2.
or the V2, right, if we're being a little historically grim. But looking at this research stack, the physics, the actual engineering, it really kicks off a millennium ago.
It's a direct lineage. I mean, you can draw a perfectly straight line from accidental discoveries in 10th century China to the Raptor engines firing up in Texas today.
So it's all one continuous struggle.
Exactly. The physics hasn't changed, just our ability to, manipulate it.
And it seems like it all hinges on containment. The sources describe these early fire arrows in the Song dynasty as just gunpowder in a bamboo tube.
Attached to an arrow, yeah.
Great for scaring the Mongols in 1232, but it must have been structurally terrifying for the person lighting it.
Oh, absolutely. Bamboo has a really low burst pressure. You can't generate real thrust if your casing just explodes before the fuel is even spent.
So it was more psychological warfare.
At first, the Koreans tried to solve the firepower problem with volume, the hwacha. It was essentially a cart that machine-gunned hundreds of those arrows.
But the real material science leap, that happened in India, late 1700s.
The Mysore rockets, yes.
Yeah.
Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. They switched to iron casings.
And that's the moment. That's when rocketry stops being fireworks and starts becoming, well, artillery.
Because iron can hold the pressure, and higher chamber pressure equals higher exhaust velocity. It's a direct translation to range.
So suddenly the British were getting hit from, what, 2 kilometers away?
Yeah, well, their own paper-cased rockets were fizzling out after a few hundred yards.
A technology which the British promptly stole, of course, to create the Congreve rocket.
Of course.
But even then, they didn't really get why it worked in a vacuum. There was that huge misconception.
The pushing against air fallacy. That was the big, the intuitive block.
Everyone thought you needed an atmosphere to sort of swim through.
Exactly. But Newton's third law clears that right up. It proves you're not pushing against the air. You're pushing against your own exhaust mass.
Action and reaction. It defines the whole game. You throw mass out the back to go forward.
Right. But with solid fuel, you're just lighting a controlled explosion that you can't turn off. To get to space, to have any precision, you need a throttle.
And that brings us to the liquid revolution.
Mm-hmm. Tsiolkovsky did the math, the theory, on liquid hydrogen and oxygen. But it was Robert Goddard who had to build the actual plumbing.
And that is the underappreciated nightmare of rocketry, isn't it? The turbo pumps.
It's basically putting a jet engine inside your rocket just to feed the main engine. That's why it took so long until the German V2 to actually cross the Kármán line.
And from there, we just scaled that plumbing up to these absurd levels.
The Saturn V, 7.6 million pounds of thrust.
Yeah.
Just a masterpiece of brute force engineering.
But a masterpiece we just threw in the ocean after every flight. The economics were just terrible.
It's like burning a 747 after one trip.
Which is the big shift we're in now with SpaceX and Blue Origin. It's not just about getting to orbit, it's about getting the hardware back.
Vertical landing changed the entire economic equation. But look at the fuel they're choosing for this new generation.
They're all moving to methalox, methane and liquid oxygen.
And that's not just because it burns cleaner. It's all about Mars.
The Mars architecture, right. You can't pack a round-trip gas tank for a 3-year mission. You have to make fuel there.
In situ resource utilization. You use the Sabatier reaction to make methane from the Martian air and, well, ice. It turns your destination into a gas station.
If you can't refuel, you can't come home.
Simple as that.
Which is just incredible. But as I get to the end of this research, it feels like we're still hitting a ceiling. Even with these amazing reusable methane engines, we're governed by the energy density of chemical bonds.
There is a hard physics limit to how fast you can make fire push you.
So where do we go from there?
Well, that's why all the long-term research is looking at post-chemical propulsion. Nuclear thermal, for instance. You use a reactor to superheat gas.
And that basically doubles the efficiency.
At least. Or you have ion thrusters for very slow, long-duration acceleration.
It really feels like we're at a turning point. We have spent an entire millennium perfecting the art of burning things in tubes.
1,000 years of fire.
But if we're serious about going interstellar, we might finally be reaching the end of the age of fire. Imagine for a second that you're standing at a starting line. But you're not looking at a 100-meter dash. You're looking at the next 50 years of, well, human history in space. It really feels like we're right on that edge,
Yeah,
where we stop just visiting space and actually start inhabiting it.
we absolutely are. I mean, if the last 50 years were about proving we could get there,
Yeah.
the next 50 are about proving we can stay there. We're looking at a real roadmap that takes us from routine Earth orbit today all the way to interstellar probes within our lifetime.
Okay, so for this deep dive, we're going to break down 3 specific phases on that roadmap. We've got full reusability, then nuclear propulsion, and finally, directed energy.
And this isn't just a sci-fi wish list.
No, not at all. This is an engineering timeline, and it really kicks off, well, right now, roughly 2025 to 2035.
That's phase one, the era of full reusability. And we really have to move past the simple idea that reusable rockets just save money.
Yeah.
It's more fundamental than that. The data shows we're about to cross a very specific economic threshold.
Right. It's not just the price tag, it's about volume.
Exactly.
Once your launch costs get down to, say, under $100 per kilogram, which is where Starship is pushing us, the whole manufacturing model changes.
It does.
You stop building satellites like Ferraris, handcrafted, super rare, and you're terrified to even scratch them, and you start building them more like iPhones. Mass production suddenly becomes possible.
That's the key. That massive drop in cost is what makes something like the Lunar Gateway, that permanent station NASA wants to put in orbit around the moon. It makes it actually affordable. You can do it without bankrupting an entire nation. It shifts space from just being an adventure to being a real economy.
And here's where that economy starts to touch us back on the ground. Point-to-point Earth travel.
Yes.
People are looking at using these suborbital rockets to move people, not just satellites. We're talking New York to Tokyo in under 30 minutes.
It sounds completely impossible, but physically it's just ballistics.
Yeah.
If the cost comes down enough, suddenly rockets are competing with long-haul aircraft. Though, to be fair, the G-forces on takeoff might spill your coffee. It's basically an ICBM, just with passengers instead of a warhead.
That's a comforting thought. But okay, so chemical rockets, burning methane and oxygen, are fantastic for getting off Earth. But here's the bottleneck.
A long haul.
Exactly. If we want to get humans to Mars alive and well, chemical rockets just take way too long.
They're just not efficient for that kind of trip.
Yeah.
A chemical burn gives you one big shove, and then you coast for months.
Yeah.
This brings us to phase two, from about 2030 to 2050, the nuclear age of spaceflight.
Now, we should probably clarify here, because nuclear rocket tends to scare people.
Right.
We're not talking about Project Orion from the 60s, where they literally wanted to detonate bombs behind the ship.
No, absolutely not. We're talking about nuclear thermal propulsion, or NTP. NASA and DARPA are actively developing this right now with Project Duraco.
So how does it work?
Think of it like a flying nuclear reactor that's just a super efficient heater. You pump hydrogen gas through the hot reactor core, it expands explosively and shoots out the back.
And the efficiency jump is just massive.
It is. You're cutting the travel time to Mars from a grueling 7 to 9 months down to just 3 or 4.
And why does that matter so much?
Radiation. It's all about radiation. Deep space is flooded with cosmic rays that just shred DNA. Cutting that transit time in half isn't about being impatient. It's a medical necessity. It's the difference between arriving ready to work or arriving having already maxed out your lifetime radiation dose.
So nuclear gets us this interplanetary bridge. But let's look even further out, 2050 and beyond. If we want to reach another star, like Alpha Centauri, well, even nuclear is way too slow.
And way too heavy. To get to relativistic speeds, a real percentage of the speed of light, you can't carry your fuel with you. The physics just falls apart. You have to, in a sense, leave the engine at home.
And this is where we get into directed energy. Concepts like Project Starshot. Instead of a rocket engine on the ship, you have a sail.
A light sail, a very, very thin one. You build a massive array of lasers on Earth or in orbit, we're talking gigawatts of power, and you focus that beam on the sail.
And it's not wind, it's the actual momentum from the photons, the light particles themselves hitting the sail.
Precisely. It's a tiny push, but it's continuous. You could, in theory, accelerate a tiny wafer-sized probe up to 20% the speed of light.
Which gets us to the nearest star in about 20 years.
Instead of tens of thousands.
That scale is just mind-bending. But before we wrap up, we have to touch on the environmental side of this. If we're launching thousands of rockets for point-to-point travel, we can't be burning dirty fuel.
The industry sees that coming. That's why the big shift is toward things like bio-LNG or methane. The goal is to actually capture CO2 from the atmosphere to create the fuel.
So it's a closed loop.
Exactly. When you launch, you're just releasing the carbon you already captured.
Yeah.
It makes the whole cycle carbon neutral.
So to recap the timeline, we're looking at mass reusability and moon landings in the late 20s.
Nuclear engines opening up Mars in the 30s and 40s.
And then laser-pushed probes heading for the stars by mid-century. It's an incredible progression.
And it's all kicked off by the cost reductions that are happening right now. That's the catalyst.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. We talked about lasers pushing probes, but the research also mentions something called space-based solar power beaming energy directly to a ship so it doesn't have to carry a reactor at all.
Which raises a really fascinating design question.
Right.
If your spacecraft doesn't need huge fuel tanks or a massive engine room because all its energy is being beamed to it from somewhere else, does it even look like a spacecraft anymore?
What would it look like?
It might just be an antenna with seats attached.
Something to think about next time you're stuck on a runway. Thanks for diving in with us.